Hey everyone, this is Alan here.
And Brie, and we're the hunter and the hippie. Thanks for
Which one of us is the hunter and the hippie?
neither and both.
I love it.
Thanks for joining us today. Our episode, we didn't know where it was going to go, and we got into talking about longevity and quality of life, and came back around to food and our food choices and mindfulness around all of that. So
Yeah, really exciting topic of conversation. Talked a little bit about intuitive eating, and we'll see about potentially getting some future guests on who are experts in that field. And with that, as usual, we want to pay much gratitude to the people in our lives. First off, all of our listeners, all of you that tune in, thank you so much. Please, please, please hit the subscribe button, hit the share button, share with anyone that you think might like to listen to us. Get the word out there. Huge thank you to Brianna Cote Photography for doing all of our photography needs for our show. And of course, Allison Band, Alllyson Band, for doing our intro and outro music. Thank you to everyone, and enjoy the episode. Good morning, Brie.
hey, it's been a while. Psych.
How you doing?
Good. It's funny, we have these periods where it's like it really has been a while, and then we talked 3 days ago.
3 days ago. Yeah.
Hey, but a lot can happen in 3 days.
A lot can happen in 3 days.
What has happened in your last 3 days?
Well, for in the last 3 days, like a few things, like regarding like just like my personal health, like it sucks. I think I shared on the last episode that I had an ear infection. Did I share that on the episode?
Yeah.
Going to Texas. I had an ear infection, so I was put on antibiotics, and antibiotics, like I'm very grateful for Western medicine, don't get me wrong, but because I definitely feel like Western medicine has helped us extend our life expectancy, but I do also feel that there's a negative side to Western medicine, and I'm experiencing it right now, and I get to experience it a little bit on our trip. But I was on antibiotics, and it just tore through my stomach, and then the ear infection was gone, but my ear was still clogged, and the doctors, went back to the doctors. Their concern was, the inflammation caused by the ear infection. So they decided to put me on an oral steroid, prednisone. And prednisone is terrible. It's made my stomach worse. It makes you feel like you're like have anxiety through the roof. Yeah, you want to jump out of your own skin. And so I've been doing like all the yoga things trying to help, but yeah. So I'm on the downside of things now, hopefully, but I haven't been feeling great, especially the last 3 days. And it's been a fight to find motivation, even to like set up for this episode. Like, I always appreciate talking to you, but just like getting up and like having the motivation and energy to just get up, it's just draining. Yesterday, you'll be happy about this, I slept a lot. A lot.
Funny how the like staying up all night hunting didn't help your ear infection. That's kind of weird.
It is kind of weird. I thought that would totally have helped. I slept. Let's just review this real quick. Everyone knows I'm terrible at math, but so like the night before, I went to bed at 9:30 and didn't wake up until 7. But then I slept. Like I took multiple naps throughout the day. multiple like hour plus long naps
Yeah.
throughout the day. And then after I taught yoga last night, I took another nap at the end of the day, like 7 o'clock at night. I'm taking a nap.
What time
And I
did
woke
you
up
wake up from your nap?
like 9:30.
And what'd you do then?
I like stayed on the couch for a little bit, like laid there because I
Yeah.
was on the couch the whole time. Stayed on the couch for a little bit until probably like 10:30, 11,
Yeah.
and then went upstairs, showered, went to sleep.
Okay.
Didn't wake up. Didn't wake up until 6:30.
Yeah. I was like, you should have
So
just gone to bed.
yeah, no, that's yeah. Like I haven't been eating, which sucks, right? Because I hired a strength coach, and so I'm like on a new workout plan, and he has me on like a macro tracking plan, and I haven't eaten in 2 days.
Yeah.
Anything substantial anyway. So it's been.
Well, that's, it's interesting. Like, all the things we do when we're sick, if we can do them consistently when we're not sick, they're quite beneficial, right? So like you're not eating because something's off, right? And you have no inclination to, because your body's saying like, I need to put all my energy into something else.
Right.
And so like that idea of like fasting, like, and I'm not talking about, you don't have to do 24-hour fasts, but we've talked about intermittent fasting before. It doesn't have to be all the time, but where can you plug in giving your body that time to kind of get rid of the malignant cells and clear stuff out. And then same thing with sleep, right? How so many people are functioning off of a minimal and not beneficial amount of sleep. And it isn't, and I'm not just saying you, and I'm not saying I don't know your sleep patterns anymore. Right. I did when we were both on Whoop. I knew a little bit.
I'm sure you could still guess my sleep patterns.
But it takes, right, like getting sick to sleep. And it's like your body's forcing you because you aren't taking the time to do that on a regular basis. And then the last thing is, I think, like, and you do sauna stuff, but it can also be anything that makes you sweat, right? Is so important. And a reflection of when we get sick, what does our body do? We get a fever. A fever isn't the illness, it's a symptom, right? And the body, like heating up,
trying to cook the
right, is trying to get rid of, is trying to detoxify whatever is in there. And so it's like if we can build that into our daily or our weekly routine, all of those pieces, however it looks, like it is going to help us, like overall health, just be more sustainable, not get to the point where we have no choice because we've broken down. And we're all going to get sick no matter what, right?
Right, for sure.
But those are, I think, very interesting, just nature, how if we pay attention to it and we implement it, how it helps us, you know? And, and I agree. Like, I have nothing against Western medicine. I agree. Like, the advances are incredible. I think it's funny you said, like, living longer. And first thing that popped in my head is, like, is that necessarily a good thing? And I would love to live long. Like, I'm not. But is it, I'm going to say, is it a good thing with the way that we're living? Is living longer really the best thing? Because we have these, because we have medical technology and advances, we've almost excused ourselves from taking care of ourselves.
Agreed, yeah.
And I'm just saying this generalization, like this isn't everyone, but it's like we will still go drink that like big gulp of green soda, but because we can like just pop this pill that'll take care of whatever is going on as a
ailment
result
we have,
of it.
right?
Yeah. And
Right.
so it's like, sometimes I look at the medical advances and I'm like, well, chicken and the egg, what came first? Like, and it all came at the same time, and the dependency has been capitalized on, I think, by man and money. But
I think the medical advances are right for longevity are great when it comes to, hey, we used to live to 25, right? Like that was, you had emperors and kings and queens ruling the world in their teenage years, right? And dead in their 20s. So I think, medical advancement taking it, because I do believe, right, that we have found better quality of life in our 30s and 40s for some of us, right? Again, generalization. But I would agree with what you're saying, like into our later years, right? And you see it like just riddled in like TV commercials and.
But would you say, like, now, do you think we're digressing? Because I have a big feeling that, like, teenagers and people in their 20s have far less high quality of life than others because of anxiety, depression. There's a lot more mental health issues, which also come back to the way that you're taking care of yourself, not just mentally, but what you're consuming, what you're sleeping, how much you're sleeping, and when I say consuming, I mean eating, reading, paying attention to, like I wonder if we are, for the first time ever, the age, what would it be, mortality rate of males, and it might just be white males, has decreased. So the life expectancy of males have, for the first time, and I don't know how long, has actually gone down.
Do you know by how much? That'd be an interesting number if it's like a year or two, right? Like, I'm not saying, right, any decrease in life expectancy is not good, but...
Well, I don't think that statistic would be brought up if it wasn't...
But, like, I do think people would bring it up if it was like, oh, we're living from, life expectancy of this population went down from 80 to 78.
Yeah.
Right? Like, in my mind, I'm like, all right, like, again, any life expectancy decrease isn't good. As for, like, a decline, I don't know. I think it's just a different set of problems. Right? Our parents, our grandparents had a different set of problems at their age, right? At that younger age, kids aren't having to worry about go down to the docks to find jobs during the Great Depression, right? To daily jobs.
But businesses aren't able to even hire people,
right?
So
it's
businesses are small. You can no longer run a small business.
Yeah, I think it's just a different set of problems. I don't know that it's that we're declining. I think it's a different set of problems. And I think, right, like, we've talked about this before. What your dad said is, right, every generation is responsible for fixing the prior generation's problems. And I think that's what it is, right? We have a generation of depression and a lot of mental illness because of the way that we lived prior to that and the way that our parents raised us. And I'm not saying our parents specifically, but right in general. And I think now we're trying to fix that. Right. So I think that we've gotten to this, right. It's like we extended the longevity of life, but we haven't necessarily extended the quality. And I think we, like, as in our generation and maybe even younger, are seeing that now. And now we're like, okay, well, we got the longevity piece down. Right? 80 years is pretty good. And how do we get more quality from it now? Right? Because I know that's where I'm focused on in my life is all right, you know what? I'll call it a day at 80. Fine. But every day, every month, every week, every year up until 80 is going to be fucking awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I think that's where we're at, possibly. I don't know that it's a decline.
Yeah.
I don't want to think.
My quality of life is great. See, this is where I have to remove myself from my own world, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I know, like, I think about, like I have good friends who are out climbing in their 50s, which is probably something that was, but gosh, you look at like a small village in the Andes and like they're working hard, like they're physically working,
Mm-hmm.
like they're able to do the equivalent of climbing, let's say, in the field, like, in their fields farming, right? And but I guess in the Western world, in like my scope, like I feel quality of life of the people around me is really solid, and probably
Mm-hmm.
depends how you define quality of life, right? But
Yes.
I don't know if that really is the true outside of my circles. If
Yeah,
I
I don't
don't
know.
know.
I think that right, like that's hard to determine because it is all about right, like how you determine quality of life,
Mm-hmm.
and you look at. So I was just watching this show on Netflix with Zac Efron. I think he did it a while back called, I think it's Down to Earth.
Mm-hmm.
But I just really heard about this, and he did an episode on the blue zones.
Yeah.
And are you familiar with the blue
Yeah.
zones? Which, so for those that aren't, right, these blue zones are zones where people live to 100 plus centurion age or higher. And he goes into one of the blue zones in Italy, and it was great to see, right, these people like living these long lives, right? But again, I was like, wait a second, but what's their quality?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like maybe they see it as quality, right? Like they get up, they sort of do the same things every day. They like walk their little streets, their cobblestone streets, and they eat their vegetables. They're not climbing. They're not, right, like they're not out there, winning Nobels or right changing the world, right? They're changing their world, but they're not changing the world. Um, so it's great to put a study and say, okay, yeah, this zone, what are they doing? How are they living? And how are they getting to 100? That's fine. But if that was me and you're like, Alan, you could live to 100 if you just do these things, I'd be like, fuck that, I'm out.
Mm.
I don't want to live to 100.
Well, one little side note with the blue zones, the only problem, and this is with a lot of those kinds of studies, is they actually don't, the inaccuracy of it is they don't take into account people who've left and moved back.
Mm-hmm.
So like there
was a lot of data.
Really, no, I mean, this is like something my dad studies and writes and researches. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what he always talks about is like the problem with those kinds of studies, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
if they don't necessarily decipher between someone who was born there and lives their whole life there, I believe, versus you were born there, you moved away, you came back, died there.
Yeah.
Or
Or if like you weren't born there and then moved there.
yeah,
Right? That doesn't.
that might be one of the things too, where like you move there at a certain age and you die there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I mean, this is also why I hate numbers in a sense too. Like why we get so wrapped up in measurable stuff, and there's so much of this that we're talking about is you can't put into numbers.
Mm-hmm.
But there is something that you can take from it, right? You can look at the different elements of an area where there seems to be longevity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny you say you like couldn't do that, and I was like, oh, that's my dream. I just want like so simple, like just give me.
No. I don't believe you.
Oh, I absolutely no.
Maybe if there was like hills to run for you, but like
No.
like this,
But we've talked about this. my biggest thing is I have to know that I can find joy and happy and contentness without running, without all of these other activities. And that has been my main focus. I mean, if you can't, like, that's...
And I'm not necessarily even like hills to run, like,
Yeah.
like to be out, like, I don't, and maybe I'm wrong, right? I'm probably wrong, but I challenge that. I do. I don't think that, like, watch the episode and maybe, and all blue zones are slightly different in, like, their capacity, but like, and this was only focused on this one blue zone, but it was this very like tight, compact, like Renaissance style village, right? With like no, like the nature didn't exist because it's just built up with like castles, right? Like castle style buildings and like that old style, like old standing, you know, pre World War One.
But earth materials.
Sure. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
but,
like those natural, like you're surrounded by these like natural materials versus all this fake stuff.
Plastics.
I don't know. It's not
concrete,
fake. It's real, right? I can touch it.
Yes. Everything's real. But I don't know. Like, I think that, and yeah, again, to each their own. I would want, right? Like, again, I think you're going to adapt to ultimately whatever. But if you had to say, Alan, like, would you sign up for this? I don't think I would.
Yeah.
But if you're like, this is the life you're going to live. But to your point, I agree, right? I do think that the studies, right, and all studies leave out data. And whether it's intentional or not intentional, that's irrelevant, right? Like, that's what science is, right? Science is you fuck up, you leave out data, right? And like, that's why they have to go and redo studies and redo things and learn more about it, or new things come up about the environments. And one of the things that was interesting that he tried bringing up, and right, we're talking about Zac Efron, and they eat a really low protein diet, which I disagree with. I think that, right, a high protein diet is critical. But I'm also not a scientist, but this is also, they're not doing a science experiment, right? Like, they're just looking and analyzing. And when you look at a lot of the humans that are living there, you know, some of the centurions that he's walking with, again, they are old, but they are frail. And so I think that there's a lot of, and to your point, right, like, you have someone like Zac Efron who was on a high protein diet. I don't know what he's eating now. But you have someone like that, like, how does that, like, you're on a high protein diet for so long and then you stop and then you move to a blue zone, right? You're right. That's a huge, how did you live prior to moving to that blue zone? And how does that take into account for your longevity and your quality of life?
Oh, and I think I'm in the camp of there's I don't think there's one proper diet. I think everyone's composition is different, and it's important to eat what supports you, because not everyone needs the same things. I mean, even just like in our body, how things get broken down, like there's certain people who can't digest potassium, you know, and there's certain people, like there's just, I don't think there's one right way to eat, and it's exploring it and seeing when and how you feel your best and playing to that. If I were to go the Ayurvedic route, they have specific stuff for, right, each composition. And then even within that, if you're imbalanced, so you can have your composition, but if there's an imbalance, you eat a certain way. And I pay attention to it, but I pay attention more to what's like happening in my body. Where do I feel I have the best energy? When do I sleep my best? And it is a constant exploration for me. So, and it's different when I'm more active and less active, and And I think, like I said, with the fasting earlier, it's like I was doing, as you know from like episodes in the past, I was like pretty deep into like a very strict intermittent fasting, and I've like gone away from that. But I think the variety on the system is also important. So I still do some fasting. I still take elements of it, but I'm not as like strict in that as I was. And it's also hard to know if that's better for me or not, because I'm had a completely different winter than I did last year, you know?
Yeah.
So I think my biggest thing for people is just awareness, like pay attention. It's being mindful of what you're eating and finding out if you're super gassy all the time, like what needs to be cut out. If you're low energy constantly, what can you change? Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I know we talked about this once before about the body, like not when you said that I'm not eating, because like I've been really frustrated with myself that I haven't been eating. And when you said that, like you sort of like calmed me a bit, or it allowed me to calm myself a bit, I guess, because I was like, oh, that's right, my body doesn't need food right now. Right, my body needs what it needs, right? Like whatever it's doing, right? It's making my body's making me nauseous, so I don't eat.
Yeah.
Right, so I don't put something in my body, so it has to work towards that, so it can't fix, it can't put the energy to fix these other problems.
Yeah. Well, it's like my when I had my ceviche purging, like I couldn't even put water in my body that night. And the next morning, I think I ate in the afternoon of the next day, but it was like, no, nothing can be in here. We're working. We're busy,
right.
And
right.
That's what we have to remember is we only have the capacity, we only have so much capacity. And so when that energy is being pulled to one thing, it's being taken from something else. So that is, again, like why I was into intermittent fasting, was like, let me condense when my body is putting energy into digesting, and then free it for other. But it's also training. Like now that I haven't done intermittent fasting as often, like it feels harder. Whereas before it was super simple.
Yeah.
Like I didn't get the like hungers like I do now. And so then I see, oh, like, look at that. That's because my body, and it's not like I'm, eating at 9:30 at night and 6 a.m.
Who does that?
I still have like a, a reasonable window that I eat within, but yeah, it's interesting to observe how we adapt. And I think that's the other part, right? To remember is we can adapt, but also giving yourself the time to test something out.
And the cravings too. That's what like I've been intrigued by this right before you even said this, but now that you're saying it, now I'm like, fuck, what are the cravings saying? And like I don't know the answer. Maybe you do, but right, like I had craving. So like I've been sick, like GI distress galore. Okay, I won't get into what that is, but hopefully everyone can figure that out.
Yeah.
Right, like GI distress galore. It is awful.
Yeah.
Right. I was 15 minutes late to starting this. Right?
I know when you said that, I was like, geez, did he forget?
Right. Like, it sucks. And so like, but then I'm nauseous too. Like it was funny. I was sharing this in yoga class. I was like, God, I hope I'm not sharing too much TMI in yoga. But like, I'm also nauseous. So like I don't throw up and I don't throw up often. Right. Even like in general life, right. Like that's not a like a sickness I get, a quote sickness I get. But like I've been nauseous, and when you're gonna throw up, like those burps you get. I've been having those for like 3 days, and like I know I'm not gonna throw up. I'm just nauseous, and like my body's working and doing whatever. And so I just haven't been eating, but the little bit that I've eaten. So I've probably eaten twice a day for the last 2 days. Today will be day 3.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how it goes. I'm still not feeling like eating. Like I haven't even, like this is my first cup of coffee and I still have half a cup.
Yeah.
And I haven't finished a cup of coffee once this week. So we can get into that. You have something to say, but also
No, not
like
about the coffee.
okay. But the cravings are weird. So, the first night, when was that? I forget what day it was, but the first night, like I was really not feeling good.
Mm-hmm.
Hadn't eaten all day. And that day I only ate once and I ate ramen.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at the gym and I came back from the gym and I was like, I just want ramen.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wanted salty carbs. And I made 2 packs of ramen and I ate the whole thing.
Yeah.
And like it wasn't like the taste wasn't good. My taste buds are all messed up from the steroids too. Like these steroids are fucking terrible. They're great, but they're terrible.
I'm gonna say they're terrible.
I'm gonna say they're terrible too. But yes. So I like everything's all out of whack, but I ate like these 2 packages of ramen and yeah, and then like yesterday I was craving pizza.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I stopped at like Little Caesars and I ate and I got like one of those $5 pizzas. And but
Alan,
literally,
you're
literally,
sick and you're eating.
But I only ate 2 slices of pizza, but it was just right. Like I was just like I need to like nothing else sounded good. Literally, I was like rotisserie chicken and I was like soup, chicken noodles, like nothing. Everything made me want to vomit.
Yeah.
And then I was like, ooh, pizza. And like and all I ate was 2 small slices of this pizza and I threw the rest away. But I wasn't nauseous. Like it didn't make me feel nauseous after eating it.
Yeah.
Like I felt again, it was just like, what is my body saying? Like, why is my body allowing me to eat ramen and pizza?
Mm-hmm.
And literally I've probably taken in less than 500 calories every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm supposed to be taking in like 3,000 plus.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's fucking crazy. The body's weird.
Yeah.
And I'm not condoning eating pizza while you're sick, but like that was the only thing that I was like, yes, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And when I got it, it was still like I got it. I was like, I'm going to walk in the pizza shop. It's going to be gross, right? No. And then like I got it. I was like, I'm going to look at it. It's going to be gross. Nope. And like I ate it slow. I was like, I'm going to eat this and I'm going to get sick.
Yeah.
No, like, so I don't know. I don't know what the body is, like you said, the body's clearly communicating. I don't know what it's saying.
Yeah. I was
But it's
going to
saying something.
say, and you don't have to answer this out loud, but you can just ponder it. What aren't you digesting in life right now?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm not answering that one out loud.
Yeah. So think about that and
Yeah. But yeah, that's a big one.
So a lot of like, right.
What happens to food you don't digest?
What is the stuff, like, what do we not want to take in? What are we not digesting in life? Like and I think everything plays off of each other. Like, again, I had that ceviche purging, and it was after my last breathwork session that I was in Arizona, but I came out of the breathwork session with it left me uneasy what came up in that breathwork.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of me thinks like, one, maybe that if I didn't have that breathwork session, the ceviche would have not been great, but not came out as violently as it did.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe coming out of that breathwork session, have I not had ceviche, something else could have purged itself in some way, because part of my intention going into that last session was, I can't remember if I did the double part of like, I let go trying to figure it out and free my body to heal. And so what did it do? I freed my body to heal. So whatever was in there was, but I know it was more than just the food, right? There was a lot in there that needed to just clear itself out.
The food was a symptom.
It was like a what's the word? A catalyst, maybe.
Catalyst, yep. Yep.
So
it just happened to be there at the right time.
Yeah. But there's, and you don't have to do this with everything. We don't need to like just spend so much time analyzing. But when you have something that's off, like look at the emotional, psychological side of what's going on in your life as well. Don't just treat, if it's physical symptoms, don't just treat that. Start to see, like when we are not addressing things emotionally and mentally, and we put it off for long enough, it starts to transpire in the body. And because it's like, okay, you're not addressing this, I'm going to force you to address it. And it starts to show up, right, as disease and illness and things like that. Because then we have no other choice but to face it.
Right.
I mean, it's the same thing getting, like, even as simple as getting so run down that you become susceptible to being sick. Well, why are you so run down? Are you giving away your power? Are you not listening to your needs, right? So, you can look at it as like, well, because I didn't get sleep and I'm running around. Well, why, right? It all comes back to emotional, psychological pieces, and not mutually exclusive necessarily. They function together, and one can be the catalyst of another, and vice versa.
Everything's connected.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we're predominantly water. We're like our cells, right? Like carry vibrations. That's not hippie shit, right? Like it's
truth.
It's truth.
People just think it's hippie shit because of Western medicine, the bad side of Western medicine.
Yeah.
It's where Western medicine has come in and say, no, this is what you need to resolve this, right? This vibration, this energy, this other stuff, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where, right, like you get these, right, like, oh, it's hippie. It's foo-foo. It's, it's these things that we think don't work.
Because you can't put a number to it. It's experiential. But I would say that any expert knowledge should always be cross-referenced with direct experience, right? Personal experience. We can't just trust handed down knowledge or the experts. It has to be tested.
I think antidotes are, right, right, stories, like not just stories, but like the experience in those stories is important. And it's different for each person. And it's different for what the body's going through. And no body is going through the same. Not no body. No, next word, body is going through the same thing. Like, even though it feels like the same thing. And that's where, right, that's one of the flaws of Western medicine is, right, we see this, it's a ear infection, blanket ear infection. And so this is how it has to be dealt with. Yeah.
Well, and just as you're saying, you like are listening and, I have these cravings, or this is happening, or I'm not wanting to eat. Just imagine, and again, there is a time and a place that you need to have the help from Western medicine. But what if we just, like, wouldn't we know what we need more than, right? Something outside of ourselves. But that's the culture that we've grown up on, is again seeking outside of ourselves on all levels, right? And so it doesn't surprise us that we override what maybe our intuition says or what we're feeling or experiencing for something outside of ourselves.
You know what? It makes me think of children. I think that not only Western medicine is part of the problem, I think, right, Western medicine, but like us as adults and parents and, right, like, quote, experienced people are part of the problem. Right, when you think about children and like you serve them dinner and whatever's on their plate, like meat, vegetables, right, and they want to eat the meat, but they don't want to eat the vegetables. Right, no, you have to eat your vegetables. Well, maybe they're onto something, right? Maybe they have that in tune with their body, right? Like they're so in tune with their bodies that, hey, no, I don't need these vegetables. All I need is this meat. One of the things I always found funny was, right, like kids, like parents will get like concerned, like, oh, my kid's not eating, but they're going to eat when they need to eat.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like, right. And I'm not necessarily comparing kids to dogs, but it's the same thing with a dog, right? They're a dog. They're going to eat when they need to eat. Right. And so I think that we potentially block or make ourselves or make our kids or whoever tune out. And like, that's how we deal with obesity or not deal with, that's how we get obesity. That's how we get unhealthy, because we're told to stop listening to our intuition. And there's actually intuitive eating, right? Like this, right? That's going on right now. Like a big thing is intuitive eating. And I think a lot of it is you've been taught to block that out. And like, no, you're supposed to eat 3 meals a day. No, you're supposed to eat 5 meals a day. No, you're supposed to eat vegetables. No, you're supposed to eat this. And when really you're not supposed to do anything, right? Like you're just, right, maybe you're supposed to listen to what your body is fucking telling you and do that.
Yeah. It's tricky though. Well, one thing I'll say is our programming as children is, I think we move into the pre-programmed mine at age 6 or 7. There's some people say 6, some people say 7, but so before then it's just really almost like beginner's mind, right? There's no programming, that it's all being developed during that age. So it's like if you have a laptop, you have the hard drive, which is what we're born with, and then all the apps that get downloaded onto it that have it function a certain way is the programming, and that by 6 or 7 is when it's been developed. So yes.
But who's putting the programming?
Well, it's a combination. Yes, it is. It's your surroundings, right? So.
And what if the programming has viruses and?
Yeah, I'm not.
Right, and like, no, I'm not saying that you're not, but like, there's all, right, like the programming can be flawed in so many ways.
Yeah, and we've talked about this in a past episode where like someone could be doing something good for that small child, but they've interpreted it in a way that's not. Right? So that absolutely plays into how we've constructed what you're talking about, like intuitive eating or listening to what our body needs, trusting people outside of ourselves or quote unquote experts more than ourselves. But I will say, like, the interesting thing with intuitive eating though is it's tricky because I definitely, there's times where I'm like, oh, I really want this. And I'm like, but I know that's not gonna settle well, you know?
I really want Little Caesars pizza.
I know. You needed it. But, and so I've done like that intuitive eating a lot like over the last, now it's been probably like 6 months, but it's when I stopped eating eggs for a while because I noticed I was like getting nauseous. I started eating yogurt, which I wasn't a big dairy fan. So I started incorporating that. And but then I'll have like, I can feel where there's, again, when I'm doing intermittent fasting, I don't get as much like of this hunger push, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now that I'm kind of eating more regular, I can feel I get these like cravings that aren't, I don't think they're cravings that I should listen to, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that,
Mm-hmm.
I think they're like another example is if when I was in the breath work in Florida, we ate at 8 a.m., 12, and 6. And I ate during those times. I never was hungry in between. Obviously, my mind was occupied and I was focused and I was doing stuff in between. And then I leave that and I'm like, gosh, now I'm like, why am I snacking or hungry in between? You know, so it's really fascinating because I was totally like fine eating that. And granted, I was hungry by the time I ate, but it wasn't to the point where like I didn't take snacks in with me. I didn't do like into the training and on the breaks eat snacks, right? But then the second I got out, I find myself in an environment where I'm not in those strict periods of eating. And I'm like, oh, let me have a little bit of this. I'm like grazing here and there. So those are craving. Like I get that urge and then I pursue it. So it's like intuitive eating is challenging of like what cravings do you listen to? How do you listen to? How do you intuitive eat? And I'm not an expert in that by any means, but because you could almost say the obesity, right? Is it like if I ate to what all of my cravings, I could potentially go down that route, you know?
100%.
So I don't know.
Oreos and Coca-Cola all day.
It's weird. Like, and so I think the piece of intuitive eating is you notice the craving, but you also observe the impact on your body, right? So it's, oh, I'm wanting this. And okay, if you have it, then how do you feel or how does that transpire digestively, energetically, all of that?
Yeah. I have a friend who is an expert on intuitive eating.
Oh, nice.
So I should reach out to her and see if we can get her on the show.
Yeah.
And because I would love to, because I'm now intrigued, like, I'm really intrigued about the kid thing. Like I really because I get to spend time with my friends' kids and I get to see their quote, what we call pickiness. And maybe it's not pickiness. Maybe it's just their body saying, I don't need that. Right? Like, right. Maybe it's their maybe, right. Like their program, they have a program, right? Like you're saying this, like the 6, 7-year-old thing, like with the programming. No. They have a program. They're born and they're programmed.
It's the hard drive.
Right. But there's something in it because otherwise they wouldn't move, right? Like, because a hard drive doesn't just exist as a hard drive.
Yeah.
Hard drive still has to spin. There still has to be data on it, right? That's why they cry. There's programming in it. Maybe it's very basic programming.
It's instincts.
Right. So, which is what we're talking about,
Yeah.
right? Instinctual, intuitive eating. So maybe it's not pickiness, right? Maybe it's just them saying, no, right? It's not that I don't like this, right? Maybe right, taste buds, right? Or you can clearly see our friend gave our friend or their kid raspberries and like, you could totally tell it was a taste bud thing.
Yeah.
Right. But maybe, when like I remember we were at our friend's house for dinner and I had Lily with me. I was holding her and I was like, all right. I was like, you want deer? And she was like, yes. And I put deer on the plate and I was like, you want potatoes? And she's like, no. And I was like, no, you got to have potatoes. And I forced it. I was like, no, I'm going to put some potatoes on here. And she's like, no. Like, she was like yelling at me. She's like 2.5 and she's like yelling at me like, no, I don't want potatoes. I'm like, look, Lily, I was like, I'm just going to put potatoes on your plate. And if you don't want them, you don't have to eat them. Yeah. Right. But like here I am forcing my programming on her. Like, oh, you need, right. Like she just wants deer. And, and she ate and she didn't eat the potatoes. Yeah. And I didn't force her, but, yeah, maybe there's something to it. So gonna have to reach out to my friend Jenny and see if we can get her on the show.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that hunter-gatherers in the 21st century book I read talked a lot about like feeding your kids what you're eating. And so that's the vegetable, like just not making a separate meal for them. Right. So they get the same vegetables, all the same things that you get on it. And because you're eating it, because we've talked about mirror neurons that exist 100%. But I think what happens at such an early age, we're already giving them something different from us. And so then when they start to incorporate more like meals, like the way that we are, they already have realized that they eat something different from their parents. And so I think there's even a programming that starts that early on where like kids, there are lots of kids who like vegetables, right? It's not like it's very kid to kid, but I bet there's a piece of it that, cause like I know one of my friend's daughters when she was really young just did not like chicken and just like hated it and would not eat it, would eat other meat, but not chicken. Turns out later in life, she's allergic to penicillin. And I think we've even chatted about this and that there's, you know,
they load chickens up with penicillin.
Yeah. So, there was something that she just didn't process well there. And there are kids, again, who don't like meat, who want vegetables. But I think an element is starting like early so that there's not this idea of like, well, I get to eat something different than you. And then it's like forever they're like, this is mine, that's yours. Like, I don't have to eat what the adults eat, you know?
Yeah, yep.
But, and I don't know. I'm not a mother and I haven't done a ton of research, but I think there's also elements of when we start, like even just the idea of formula versus breast milk, right? At a very young age, there's a movement away from, what's natural, I guess.
Yep. That's what I was going to say. What's natural. And like, even with formula, you're talking about, right, these micro ingredients that like through machine processing, right? Metal scraping, friction, right? Like, right, these unnatural things getting into our food sources. Another reason why we should hunt and process our own meat.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, well, what I will say is like, again, there's a diet for everyone, right? What it consists of. But I think I can say that the best in any of those variations is whole foods, right? As much as you can get to the natural source and existence of it, the better.
Whole foods or real foods. I like real foods.
Yeah.
And I guess real could be subjective too, but and the reason I say that is because there's this whole food diet, and it excludes meat, I believe, like. Or it excludes some things that I'm like, like that is a whole food. Like, so I get what you're saying. Like when you say whole foods.
Yeah.
But I think that like some people can be thrown off just a little bit because there is this whole food diet.
Oh, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I have a few friends that have done it. I think it excludes meat, honestly. I forget. But
Because then there's the Whole30, but that's meat.
Maybe that's what it is.
Whole30 is like more like I think tends towards the paleo. So
paleo, okay. So like when I think and just right, my thoughts, my opinions, right? Like I agree with you. We should be eating real food, right? Like from the source. So like, right? Like I was talking with a friend about this. Like rice is great because rice has very little processing, right? To get it to be rice, right? But like oats are good, right? They're real. However, the processing to make them edible and digestible could be questionable, right? And we're like meat, right? Like if you're sustainably sourcing your meat, right? However you want to view that as sustainably sourcing, right? But then when you look at Cocoa Puffs, that's not real, right? That is a conglomerate of multiple process, right? And like, I don't think people understand, or maybe they don't get it or they grasp it, is like when you think of something like a Cocoa Puff, right? It's processed foods mixed with processed foods, right? Like there is white refined sugar in Cocoa Puffs. So that is what was a real food. I agree that, right? Like sugar is real, right? It's you can break it off and eat it right off of the plant, right? But then we process it to refine it to this white grain that what we think sugar is. And then we take it and then we continue to process it with these other processed foods to make this black ball that we drown in milk, right? Like, you know, and like we're so far removed from that whole or real food, right? The sugar cane has zero resemblance in this Cocoa Puff, right? And so I agree. I think that, you know, we should be trying to get our sources of food from, right, as close to the source as possible, whether we call that whole or real. But I don't think we should limit ourselves to, like, you only have to eat meat, or you can't eat meat, or you can't eat vegetable, right? Like, I think it's what works for you.
And it changes. It can change month to month. It can change. Like women, we regulate on a 28 to 32 day cycle, our hormones. So what we eat throughout that month is going to be different based on our needs, right? Hormonally, men regulate on a more of a 24-hour cycle.
I just learned that. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Did you know that? Like,
Yeah.
like if men listening, you have a cycle.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's 24 hours, your hormone cycle, and it's all the same hormones too, as women, right? It's just, we don't have the levels that
you regulate, because you regulate daily.
Regulated. Right.
Whereas we see the drastic differences because it's spanned over
weeks, right? Like,
yeah.
Right. Like men, we have progesterone, we have estrogen, right. But it's all done in a 24-hour cycle. That's why you get tired at night. That's why, right? Like now imagine a woman who her estrogen or progesterone peaks for a week, right? And their testosterone is down substantially, right? And they don't even have a lot of testosterone to deal with anyway. But, right, where men, we get our testosterone and then our progesterone peaks a little bit and then comes back down. Like, I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
I need to read more into it, because we have a quote cycle, just like women. It's just, we get to go through it every fucking day. Whereas women, it's just fucking extended over this 28 to 31 day period.
Yeah.
Which is wild. Which then also, right, like I think is where you were going, is, right, like that determines what you should be eating. And
maybe when you should be eating for a man, right? Like maybe that dictates when you should be eating on a daily basis if you're a male. And then, but even phases of life, like our internal makeup changes over time too. So what you ate at one period of your life isn't necessarily what you should be eating at a different period. And I was going to say something and now I can't remember. Oh, what I wanted to say when you were talking about the processing, it's like, think about this. If something can sit on a grocery store shelf for, I don't know, weeks,
months, years,
right? Is that, just imagine what it's doing once it's inside of your system. Right. That's, I think, that's how maybe point. You think about, and I am no saint, let me tell you.
I'm sitting here talking about Little Caesars pizza here, so
you know, and
you're in good company.
And I make exceptions, but it's like I'm always aware that I'm making that exception or I'm making that choice when I do it. And that's what I will say is that just not going into the mindless consumption of food, of life, man. Like we come back to longevity, right?
Beautiful.
Journal. Or breath first. Are people just turning it off?
We need to change it up again.
Well, actually, I'll do breath, but it's not really going to be breath because it'll be an assignment. So I guess it's similar to journal, but it's not.
I love it.
Your next item of food that you eat, as you take it, sit with it, take a few breaths, think about where it came from. So if it was from your yard, think about its life cycle. If it was a banana from, I don't know, where do bananas come?
Costa Rica. You're probably not getting a banana from Colorado. Or...
right. Think about what went into it growing, like it getting planted, growing, who took care of it, how it got to where it is now. Think the process,
the energy.
Think the people, right, involved, and allow yourself to just give it love and gratitude for anything in the process of it getting that it didn't have on its way of getting to being in front of you. And then take a few breaths with that. And then as you eat it, try to take with every bite around 30 chews. And in those 30 chews, just notice the different flavors, textures. Notice how your body is feeling in reaction to it. And then take some time afterwards to just breathe and see how you feel and have some awareness for the next few hours of what happens in your body after consuming it. So.
You mean the 3 to 4 chews and swallow isn't a good thing?
It's really hard to do 30 chews.
I bet.
I started to do like a really big mouthful, but I try, but oh my gosh, yeah. That actually, it's incredible how, though, that can really make a difference, is just chewing your food more.
I'm going to give it a shot. I look forward to it.
So even if you don't do 30 chews, just chew it until it's mush in your mouth.
I'm not going to get deep into this, but there's actually science behind a lot of the issues with our muscles and our jaws and our and heart disease and everything related, because we're not chewing. And it's not necessarily that we're not chewing, it's that we aren't eating foods that require us to chew. We're eating so many soft foods that we're not working our facial muscles, and it's both of it. It's like we're eating foods that we don't have to chew, but we're also not chewing when we we're eating like swallowing chunks. Right. And it leads to snoring and sleep apnea and the collapse of the entire collapse of the face. Right? Because what a lot of people don't realize is, we may or may not think about the bones in our face, but there are many bones in the face, and without the muscle support and structure, they collapse, and they collapse on the organs in our face: sinuses, nose, nasal cavities, ears, ear infections, all those things. Which, so chewing is actually a very good. Chewing gum. I don't like gum. It's because it releases it signals your body that you're eating. Yes. And so it releases the enzymes, all that stuff, and you're not eating. So I'm talking to specifically the book Breathe by James Nestor. Yeah. We've talked about it before. And he actually talks about chewing gum is actually very good for you, but not like the juicy fruit, double mint, hubble bubble type of gum. Yeah. He talks about a few very specific gums that aren't great in taste. Yeah. And mainly what it's for is for the essential. It's like a workout. It's for the muscle building. It's a really hard, probably not enjoyable. It probably still makes those signals from the brain to the body, but that's probably a different story.
But you could do it. I mean, you could do something like that, like right after you eat or right before you eat, you know, so that there is something to digest once it's like, hey.
Yeah.
Or you just have something that you chew on that you eventually swallow, like, I don't know, a piece of ginger or some fennel seeds, you know, you can chew on it and
Cool. Well, I would say that you covered both breath and journal,
What?
but I'll just add a little bit to the journal and just say that, write about your experience in eating, in all the things that we've talked about today, right? Like sickness, Western medicine, Eastern medicine, right? Like this holistic view, right? Like listening to your body. Just write about it all. And with that, we'll catch you on the next time.
Yeah.
It was good chatting with you, Brie.
Good to see you and chatting.
See ya. All right. Hey, everyone. This is Alan
wait.
here.
I was.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were ready.
Okay.
Are you ready? Yeah. Now? You ready? You sure?